Good Sunday morning, everybody. I'm Schuyler Callihan here on Between the Eers. West Virginia winning 42-21 yesterday over Cincinnati. They moved to 7-4 and 5-3 in Big 12 conference play, with only one game left, being at Baylor next Saturday. So there's a lot of things that we could talk about. We could talk about the game specifically, but I'm going to take more of the macro look at this. Okay, and that's pretty much kind of what I did in my Sunday Morning Thoughts article that you can check out on Mountaineers Now. And look, this football is a game of inches. Saturday's game not necessarily was, but football is a game of inches, and I think it's just more than the game itself. It's the big picture. It's in terms of wins and losses. It's head coaches and their job security. And look, West Virginia is this close to being an 8-3 football team right now. That close. All it takes is one ball hitting the ground on a Hail Mary for this team to be 8-3. And I know we could go back at that game and say it was really probably a game West Virginia should have never won in the first place, because they just did not play well in that second half against Houston and got down 2 scores, had to battle all the way back, and it was probably a game they should have never won. But they did battle back, and when you take the lead with 12 seconds left, you shouldn't lose that game. So it is a game of inches for sure, just like it is a game of inches for Neal Brown, who, again, I've talked to Eugene about this, and I think he's on the same boat as me with this. Neal has to put the ball in the end zone in terms of his job security, because it feels like every time you start to believe that, okay, this is the guy, this is where West Virginia starts to make its climb, something happens. He wins four out of the first 5 games of the year. You're thinking, oh my goodness, okay, 4-1, the schedule's setting up really nice now, and you've got a really good chance to go home 5-1. Houston Hail Mary happens. You think, okay, well, you come back home, you have a chance to bounce back against Oklahoma State, who had been playing well at the time, but at the beginning of the season really wasn't one of the better teams in the Big 12. And you have the lead going into the fourth quarter, and you stub your toe. They gave that game away. And boy, did they give that game away. So then you start to think, oh boy, is he the guy? You start questioning, oh my gosh, if they go to UCF and they lose and they're 4-4, there's no way he can survive that, especially with the remaining schedule that he has left. Well, they go to UCF. He does more than survive. They win pretty comfortably. Comes back home, beats BYU soundly. You're thinking, all right, the way the schedule's setting up, now you've got an opportunity here to where if you go out to Norman and pull off the unthinkable, something that's never been done since West Virginia's joined the Big 12, and that's beat the Sooners at their own place. If you do that, you're right in the conversation to make it to Dallas. But we all know what happened there. 39-point beatdown, and then all of a sudden those talks start to reemerge back at the 1 or the 2 yard line with his job security. Losing to Oklahoma is not something that you should be bringing the pitchforks out and the torches. It's the way they lost that game and the magnitude of that game. It's a Big 12 elimination game. And for that to be the product that was put on the field, that's going to cause fans to show that type of anger and cause fans to say that we want Jimbo Fisher and all that other stuff. So this week, again, You go into it, you're 6-4, and on paper, again, we've said this many times, on paper, West Virginia was the better team, but there's a reason why these games are actually played, just like the Houston game was earlier in the year. You go into it thinking, okay, it looks like Neal's gonna be fine. They're 6-4. They got Cincinnati and Baylor. Both teams entered the weekend 3-7. You're not really thinking that either one of them are going to have much of a chance, but there's always a chance that something crazy can happen, or that West Virginia just for whatever reason just lays an egg that day, and the other team plays their best game, much like what happened in Norman. And with Cincinnati, it's not that far fetched to think that they could hang around. They have one of the top rushing attacks in the country, not just the Big 12, the country. They have one of the best defensive fronts in college football, not just the Big 12, the country. And when you have those two things, you have a chance against just about anybody, which they have for the most part all season long. They've been playing very close games in the Big 12. It comes down to their efficiency in the red zone and turnovers. As I just talked about on the walkthrough game day show last week, when we broke this game down, they had 3 one-score losses in Big 12 play, and in those 3 games, they were -5 in turnovers. Can't do that. That's how you lose games. They did not generate a single turnover, and they gave up 5 of them. So, but anyways, back on track here. If you lose to Cincinnati or Baylor, then all of a sudden there's still a little bit of a cloudy vibe in the air, right? Because you can't lose to those types of teams really at any point in the season, but certainly not at the end when you're supposed to be playing your best football. And when these two teams have kind of mentally checked out of it, especially Baylor, who is now 3-8, and we'll see next week. But Cincinnati picked up their first Big 12 win going into this game, so you knew you were going to get something out of them. They maybe felt like, hey, let's finish the season strong. Won a couple of games down here in the stretch and feel good about 2024. Baylor, I don't know that you're going to get that, but again, that's why these games are played. So if Neal were to lose at Baylor, I think that's, I don't know that it's a fireable offense, but it's not good for the optics, because you already lost technically one of these games already this year against Houston. You play one of the worst games of the season in Houston, not the worst, but one of the worst. And Houston's one of the worst teams in this conference, and you lost to them. You can't have 2 of those on your resume for this season. You just can't. But getting to 8 wins is huge for Neal because it hasn't been done. 7 wins hasn't even been done under his tenure until this year. So I think you're starting to see that there is progress being made, but you have to finish this season strong. You have to go and beat Baylor. No questions about it. Have to go do that. Finish the season 8-4, go to a bowl game. And look, if you lose the bowl game and you're competitive in it, no one's going to really fault you for it. No one's going to be upset. Everyone's still going to be feeling pretty good about this program and where it's headed. But you can't lose to Baylor, and you can't go to the bowl game and just get your butt kicked unless for some reason you just have a crazy amount of injuries, or you're playing some team that you probably shouldn't be playing in the bowl game, like a 10-win team that somehow you got faced up against. So that's really the only 2 things. And even then, you got to compete. But also, too, I want to take a slight shot, not a major one, but a slight shot here at some of the fans, because there's been a lot of fans just bitching, moaning, and complaining about the schedule and how all Neal's going to be here for 2024 because this year's an anomaly. It's a weak schedule. It's a product of a weak schedule. And if they played Kansas or Kansas State or Texas or Iowa State, that they would have had this record or that record. Well, look, you can only play who's on your schedule. And I get the frustration. They haven't beaten many teams with winning records. I understand that Neal Brown has now gone almost 5 years without getting this team in the top 25. I understand all those things, and they're very valid points. What's also a valid point is you can only play who's on your schedule. Do you think that for the first time, or do you think that for the last 10 years or so that there was much complaining about having Kansas on the schedule? No. Everyone looked forward to that game. It was a gimme win. It was a guaranteed win. Well, guess what? Kansas is no longer or wasn't on the schedule this year. Now, yes, this is a much different Kansas team, but these things are going to be cycled. When you have 14 teams in your conference, you're going to have years that are more difficult than others. That's just the way it works. You can't possibly have the similar strength of schedule every year. And again, it's not constructed by the league to make sure everyone has an even schedule. It's a lot to do with travel. It's a lot to do with proximity to each other. You want West Virginia to play the Cincinnatis and Central Floridas of the world as much as possible on a regular basis. But look, okay, there was 8 other teams in the Big 12 that had Cincinnati on their schedule. There was 8 other teams in the Big 12 that had Houston on their schedule, and BYU and Houston. You're not the only ones. And there was multiple teams that had 2, 3, or 4 of those teams on their schedule. Here's what I have to say to those fans. Look, this team has the potential to do something it hasn't done since 2016, and that's win at least 9 football games. Just enjoy it, okay? Enjoy winning. It's a hard thing to do because this college basketball season is not going to be that fun. I can tell you that right now. And I think you probably already know that. It's going to be a long basketball season. It's going to be a long, long, long time until we get back to September next year for football. Enjoy what this team is doing. This is a good football team for the most part, I believe. Good offensive line. You got a quarterback that is playing for the most part really well outside of one game. You've got some really intriguing young pieces to build around. View this with the glass half full and think, man, Garrett Green's coming back next year. You have multiple pieces of that offensive line that are coming back. You've got Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson coming back. You've got Rodney Gallagher, Traylon Ray. A lot of those guys on defense are going to be coming back. This is something that you need to just kind of sit back and let play out. If you're a Neal Brown hater, if you want him gone, or if you're somebody that wants Jimbo or anybody other than Neal Brown to walk through that door, just take a slight pause from that, step back, and enjoy this. This doesn't happen often. No one feels sorry for you when you lose to Houston on a Hail Mary. No one feels sorry for you when you run into your own punter or your own punt returner. But at the same time, West Virginia fans shouldn't feel sorry for having an incredibly weak schedule. It's going to happen. Next year, someone's going to have this type of a schedule. And those fans are going to maybe complain about it, maybe not, depending on what school that is. You can't take winning for granted. So, look, there's a lot of things that can happen in these final 2 games. But I think where Neal is, he's in a good spot. I one of the articles I did, I think it was on Friday, I did a little hot seat meter kind of article because I explained this. Like, look, if you go out and I mean, it seems like he's safe. I gave him like a 6.5 out of 10. The only reason I did that is because there's 3 games left and anything can happen in those 3 games that carry a lot of weight. But if you would lose one of those two games at the end of the season, it's going to drop significantly from 6.5. If he wins both games, he's coming back. There's no question about it. Doesn't even matter what happens in the bowl game. If he lost both Cincinnati and Baylor, then I don't think that was going to be survivable. Not in year 5 where you go 6-6. That's why I still thought that there was a chance, technically, mathematically speaking, there was a chance that Neal could be canned. I don't think it's going to happen now. It especially won't happen if they find a way to get another win in Waco. So, look, enjoy the wins. This team's doing something it hasn't done very often. It's doing something that hasn't happened since 2016, and that's win, or has a chance of doing, and that's winning 9 or more games. And use this as a situation that could be where things turn. And until it doesn't, then you can complain. Okay. Look, covering West Virginia, growing up in West Virginia for the first 18, 19 years of my life, there's been a lot of downs. There's been a lot of ups. Enjoy these good moments. They're not always going to last, as we all know. So I understand the weak schedule argument. I wholeheartedly agree, but this is why I say, look, even if you go 8-4, 9-4 this year, or 8-5 or 9-4, it doesn't necessarily mean that Neal will make it to 2025. Because if you win 8 or 9 games this year, that raises the bar for the expectations. You can't go to 8 wins or 9 wins in year 5 and then fall back to 6-6 type of a season. You can't do that. Now, coaches that have had success in the past at that said school, they can have a down year. It's going to happen. And it's going to happen again in the future for Neal. It just will. But you can't have that happen 1 year after this happens. You just can't. Because then the optics say over his tenure, you have one season that's not like the others. And it maybe was because of that incredibly weak schedule. But we don't know right now. So this is why I'm saying let everything play itself out. And for those Jimbo, fans that want him to come to West Virginia, just simmer down, because who knows? Who knows what Jimbo's going to do? He may take this next year off from football, go into a TV role, or just sit back and collect his money and relax and try and go around and find what, little pieces of advice that he could pick up in his year off. And if that situation plays out, he takes a year off, Neal Brown takes a step back from where they were this year, and they're about a 500 team again, then this conversation will be had again next November. So just relax, enjoy the wins, because there's not going to be many more of them coming up here in the college basketball season, at least for the men's side. So anyways, I know that was pretty long-winded, but had to get that stuff off my chest. We'll be back here in a couple of days on Between the Ears to break down how West Virginia can beat the Baylor Bears. And then on Thursday, I'll be rejoined with Eugene for our final The Walkthrough Game Day show of the regular season. And as I mentioned yesterday on the post-game show, we will do a preview show for the bowl probably 2 days before the game. So we'll remain consistent with that schedule. Make sure you give us a like and subscribe on YouTube at Mountaineers Now. Follow us on X at Mountaineers Now as well. And we appreciate you guys for tuning in to another week of game coverage here. And we'll see you guys here in a few days. Take care.